Welcome back to the World History Channel. Today we begin our journey through one of the darkest and most haunting chapters of human conflict, the story of a generation lost to war. The camera opens on the image of a teenage German soldier, standing alone in the ruins of a bombed-out city. His face is dirty, his uniform hangs loosely on his young frame, and his eyes carry a weight far beyond his years. He was supposed to be in school, not war. But by 1943, boys barely 16 were being pulled from classrooms and thrust into the front lines, their innocence shattered by orders they barely understood. Now picture the trembling hands of this same boy, gripping a torn piece of paper, a farewell letter, stained with dirt and silent tears. "If I don't come home," he writes, "tell mother I tried to be brave." This wasn't just a war of bullets and bombs. It was a war that consumed hearts and souls. In the next scene, two brothers stand back to back on the battlefield. One in the gray uniform of the Wehrmacht. The other in black, bearing the insignia of the SS. Both trained to fight. Both taught different loyalties. The battlefield became a place where bloodlines clashed with ideology, and love was buried beneath orders and fear. Shift now to the frostbitten trenches of Russia, where soldiers huddled for warmth under tattered coats. Their rifles were frozen in their hands. The enemy was not just the Red Army, it was starvation, exhaustion, and the merciless cold. In those icy ditches, youth was not just lost, it was ground into the dirt. Above them, the sky over Stalingrad burned orange and red, as German and Soviet forces clashed in one of the most brutal battles in history. Smoke swallowed the horizon. Streets became graveyards. And inside that inferno, a generation fought not for victory, but to survive one more night. Some tried to save what they could. A young nurse, barely older than the wounded soldiers around her, moved from one broken body to the next inside a makeshift hospital. Her hands were steady, but her eyes told a different story. Fear, trauma, helplessness. She was trained to heal, not to witness death in waves. And still, the city burned. An aerial view of Berlin shows a once great city reduced to ash and ruin. Every building, every home told a story of loss. The cost of conquest was carved into every brick and stone. In the shadows of a candle-lit bunker, high-ranking Nazi officers plotted their next move. Maps spread across tables. Cold calculations, lives reduced to lines and objectives. Far from the trenches, the war was decided by men who would never taste the mud, the blood, or the bitter cold of battle. And then the war's cruelest face, the forced separation of a Jewish family at a concentration camp gate. A mother pulled from her child, a father screaming in vain. This wasn't strategy, this was genocide, and soldiers were ordered to enforce it, many too young to understand the full horror of what they were doing. A sniper, hidden behind a shattered window, waits in silence. His finger on the trigger, his breath held. Behind the crosshairs may be another boy, another frightened soul just like him. This was the generation caught between orders and morality, between boyhood and brutality. They were told they were heroes, but many died before they ever became men. This is their story. This is the cost of war. The story of war is not just written in strategy and politics. It is etched into the hearts of those who lived it and those who barely survived it. Imagine a silent street in a shattered village. The walls are cracked, the roof's gone, yet in the middle of the rubble, a few children play. They toss around dented helmets and empty shell casings like toys. They do not understand what they're playing with. To them, war is a game. But those twisted remnants once held the power to kill. In this world, even childhood has been rewritten by violence. Flames burst in the distance as a Soviet tank crashes through what remains of German defenses. Its treads grind over barbed wire and corpses alike. The earth shakes, smoke spirals into the air, and still the tank moves forward. For many on both sides, survival was not about victory. It was about pushing through, inch by inch, in a world where death was always just a heartbeat away. Across the continent, an American GI stumbles upon a concentration camp. His face shocked, pale, stunned. Behind barbed wire, hollow faces stare back at him. He was trained to fight an enemy, but nothing prepared him for this. For the smell, the silence, the rows of bodies too thin, too still. In that moment, war wasn't about good or evil. It was about what humanity had allowed itself to become. Back home, a father holds his son tightly. The young man wears a new uniform, the insignia still bright. They both cry, one for the memories they've shared, the other for the unknown future. This is what war does. It doesn't just take lives, it suspends them. Every hug could be the last. Even sacred places could not escape. A church once filled with light and hope now stands broken, its stained glass windows shattered by shellfire, the wooden cross dangling by a nail. Faith trembles in the face of firepower, but even in darkness, there were sparks of light. Picture 2, war brothers, years later, locking eyes across a field of graves. One reaches out. The other hesitates, then embraces him. They survived? Not. Everyone did. And while they carried guilt, they also carried each other. A close-up shows the trembling hands of a soldier clutching a dog tag soaked in blood. Not his own. This was his friend, his comrade, maybe even his brother. In that moment, no flag mattered. Only memory. Only lost. An old veteran sits alone, staring at a photo of his younger self in uniform. The boy in the photo has fire in his eyes. The man holding it has tears. Time did not erase the war. It simply changed how it lived inside him, marching through heavy rain. A line of soldiers slogs forward. Mud cakes their boots. Their faces are barely visible through the downpour. Each step feels like a lifetime. But they do not stop, because stopping meant death. And then night falls. Artillery flares light up the battlefield in eerie bursts. Shadows dance among the smoke and fog. This is where friendships were forged and lost, where men became brothers, and where many still lie beneath the earth, remembered only by those who were lucky enough to come home. The war may have ended, but its shadows never truly disappeared. What began with gunfire and parades ended in silence and memory. In the heart of Nazi Germany, parades once roared through the streets, red flags waving, military trucks rolling. In perfect unison and crowds cheering for a future promised through propaganda. It was a performance of power, a display of unity. But behind the banners, behind the noise, fear quietly ruled. In the dim glow of candlelight, a lone soldier tapped out Morse code in a hidden corner of occupied territory. His message, short and urgent, vanished into the static desperation masked by precision. These secret transmissions were lifelines. Quiet defiance in a world screaming with war. Far beneath the ground, a bunker shook as shells exploded nearby. The emergency red lights flickered, casting shadows across maps and trembling faces. The enemy was no longer a distant threat, it was at the door. Trapped and under siege, some would fight to the last breath. Others would never see daylight. Again. At the break of dawn, a prisoner of war camp emerged from the frost. Silent figures stood in ragged lines, their breath rising like ghosts in the freezing air. No words were spoken, just numb endurance. These weren't soldiers anymore, they were survivors clinging to the faint hope of liberation. In one soldier's final moments, the battlefield came alive in a flashback. Gun in hand, dirt on his face, blood dripping down his uniform, he faced a wall of enemies with nothing left to lose. Not every act of courage makes history books, but this was valor in its rawest form. Flipping through a worn diary, we find pages filled with sketches, images of horror, monsters with human faces, and tears soaked into the corners. It was not just a record of war. It was a cry for help. The mind, just like the body, bled in silence, and then came the silence that followed. Rows of graves stretched endlessly under a sky the color of ash, no trumpets. No cheers, just one white rose left on a simple cross. A name, a date, and behind it 1,000 stories that would never be told. Through the broken glass of a bombed home, a child watched as soldiers marched by, their boots echoing through streets that once knew laughter. His eyes held no innocence, only questions. No adult could answer. That child would grow into a world forever shaped by what he saw that day. In the aftermath, justice struggled to speak. In courtrooms, Nazi officers sat behind glass walls, blank and cold, while survivors stood, trembling, recounting horrors the world didn't want to believe. Some got justice. Many didn't, but truth once spoken could not be erased, and in one final image time folds in on itself. A young soldier, eyes wide with fear, slowly transforms into an elderly man, his chest adorned with medals, his hands shaking as he remembers. The war ended decades ago, but the echo of each bullet, each scream, each goodbye still lives within him. The war never truly left. It only aged, buried beneath the silence of those who carried it.